sleepest, arise from the dead.
Read the Bible, you'll find out that God's not too happy with what's going on around us.
Redeem the time, because the days are evil.
The Bible has not changed.
Boldly proclaim the restoration and preservation of Christian values in America.
Satan has brainwashed a whole nation.
As goes the church, so goes the nation.
Nobody's convicted of anything anymore.
And now, here's Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Nobody's convicted of anything anymore. I just love it when they say that. We're going to talk about convictions this morning. By the way, go Jesus and go Bucks.
At least you put the Lord first.
Yeah.
That's good.
You're about to listen to 2 hours of opinion and entertainment supplied by Last Call Radio. We're not doctors, lawyers, politicians, professional journalists, nor do either of us hold a doctorate degree in anything, nor would that really make any difference in today's day and age. Opinion, of course. We only ask that you personally and or corporately not take our statements or those that we voice from others personal, nor do we recommend that you act on them as if they are facts, although they might very well be. But again, that's our opinion. You're not required to listen to, act on, or repeat anything that you hear today, nor assume that they are facts, and that any information we present is by no means meant to harm or threaten anyone.
Therefore, we're harmless.
Yes, sir. A simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Russian. You know, as we're learning more and more every day, the cost of freedom is always high. But as Americans, we have in the past always paid it. But now in our woke society, a society of opulence and pleasure, have Americans actually taken the path of surrender by their silent submission in order to keep their stuff? It does look that way, doesn't it? Or are those masks that your neighbor's wearing just an illusion? On Last Call today, we've got a great guest. To be coming up to quarter hour. We're going to examine the price of submission and the high cost it entails. And know for a fact that you can pay now or have those you love and leave behind pick up your tab, plus a heavy interest. So how was your Thanksgiving get together, folks? Huh? Has COVID affected that at all? It just isn't the same anymore, is it? Was that mask you're wearing or just a piece of duct tape over your mouth to keep the peace?
It's called a beard.
At a distance, of course. Lots of hugs and kisses, eh? Huh? Did you get a lot of that over? Huh?
Yeah, I did.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
The grandbabies were all over me.
Oh, my. Wow.
Yeah, that's a joy.
And again, our guest today has a story of courage that you're going to find hard to believe. Was he crazy or just ahead of the curve? We report, you decide. That sounds familiar. Saturday morning and Do Radio at its finest with yours truly, BJ, and Mr. Anderson. And today's guest leading the way. 2 hours of Christian talk radio with a sting can be found at the locations below. www.lastcallradio.live. Lastcallradio.live. If you'd like to join us by phone and talk to myself, Mr. Anderson, or our guest, you can dial 614-423-4220. 614-423-4220. You can also listen just by phone. Don't have to talk. We've got a couple of numbers there, 641-741-0816. It's on the website. And if you get in early enough, you're welcome to become part of our audience by going to the link that I sent out to those folks that requested it. What a week. What a week.
And our guests that are there, if they want to comment, they can choose the private chat to send us a message.
Yep. Speaking of holidays, according to the Blaze contributor, Phil Schreiber, I think it was November 26th when he wrote this, there's a Christian charity known for raising money through red collection boxes around the holidays. It's now pushing anti-racist and critical race theory ideology onto donors, asking that their white donors apologize for their unconscious bias. How do you spell assume?
Unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm. According to Phil, this year, in addition to requesting monetary contributions towards the global mission, the organization is calling on donors to reckon with their deep-seated attitude of racism. Paranoia is just incredible. There's a racist behind every tree, under every bed, hiding in every organization. Come out and get you because of your melatonin. In a guidebook titled Let's Talk About Racism, the charity asked donors to consider the ways in which they have consciously or unconsciously supported prejudicial systems that inflict harm on racial minorities. And it acknowledges with regret that the Salvationists have sometimes shared in the sins of racism and conformed to economic, organizational, and social pressures that perpetrate racism. Folks, racism is the ultimate conspiracy theory, and it will die when we stop speaking this insanity into existence. And I've recommended once, twice, 3 times, 4, that when you go to public meetings, and I recommend you go to those public meetings, especially the ones close to you, the school board meetings, the city council meetings, you go to those meetings and you get up and speak, and you look at your school board members and you look at your city council members or your township trustees and ask them by show of hands, how many of you practice systematic racism? And then pause. Nobody's going to raise their hand. And then turn to those there, probably aren't that many there to begin with, which is a part of the problem, and ask the audience, how many of you, show of hands, practice systemic racism? You're not going to get any show of hands. And then turn back to the council, the board, the township, and say, how many of you teach your children, your nieces, your nephews, your first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, to be racist? Show of hands, please. How about this? How many of you actually know personally a racist? Asking the questions, folks. Systemic racism, if it is as bad as they want us to believe it is, you would have people in your family that stay up all night thinking about ways of hurting, harming people that don't have the same skin color. It just doesn't happen. Do we discriminate? Of course we do. All different types of areas. By the way, that's the Salvation Army we're talking about. I just find that not hard to believe, because I've had problems with the Salvation Army for some time now. But it's just crazy. Then the COVID monster, the COVID religion. We have a South African strain. By the way, COVID, does evolve of sorts. But it's my understanding, again, I'm not a doctor, it's just my understanding that it never evolves upward. I don't believe man evolved from primordial sludge, nor do I believe that the newest and greatest and latest version of COVID is going to be worse physically than the other one, but I think this one will be worse than the original COVID. We have women who were pregnant that did not get, good for them, humble opinion, did not get the vax because they were afraid of what it's going to do to their child. And again, I believe rightfully so. But that's a untouched market now, isn't it? And what about those newborn babies? We've got the age down to 5 years, right? We've got the age down to 5 years. And all the advertisements, all the one-sided conversations. My goodness, this is horrible. When you make decisions based on information, right? But if the information is limited, or it's all, excuse the term, prejudicial, then what kind of a decision can you possibly make? It's pretty clear you can only make one decision based upon the information that you have. It takes a lot of wisdom, a lot of thought, a lot of examination, which our guest has done today, to take a look at what's really happening. And I said before, when we first started on this journey in March of last year, I went to the FDA and I was going to look up how many deaths there were of flu in 2019 and compare it, the number of deaths, to COVID in 2020. Well, the first thing I found was it was a range. I think it was 16,000 to 62,000 that had died of flu. And I'm going, wait a minute, hold on. What do you mean 16 to 62? Which one was it? And then I dug in deeper and I found out that this was basically an estimate, likely based on modeling with limited information. So, I mean, how do you compare it? You can't. You really don't know. Then Fauci says you don't have to wear the mask. And then WHO comes out with one side of something and then another side of something and continually vacillates. They'll tell you this is evolving. Truth doesn't evolve, folks. It's there, as plain as the nose on your face. So what I've seen and what I've noticed are an incredible amount of inconsistencies. An incredible amount of inconsistencies. And I've also noticed, and we're going to get to this in a later portion of our show today, that people that just question the narrative, that say maybe we shouldn't be in so much fear, they end up losing their jobs, losing their friends, losing family members. There's the state of Ohio, Pam Popper, over a year ago, asked for the figures. You say we're in a pandemic. Let me see the figures. Let the average Ohio citizen look at those figures. The state of Ohio refused to give those figures, which are paid for by the taxpayers, by the way. Refused to give them the figures. They had to take them to court. And you know what court is like, watching paint dry. They still don't have the figures. Yet they still claim that it was a pandemic. Will we ever know? I don't know. By 2 or 3 or 4 years' time that they get this, is it really going to make any difference? Really? Is it? So what do we do in the meantime? How do we fight this? Do we fight it? Or do you just say, oh, well, that's just the way things are going to be. That's going to be the new life that we're going to lead. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as Mr. Anderson is concerned, as far as our listeners are concerned, that dog won't hunt. Our guest today has a story to tell. A professional who did his research and acted on that. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. When we come back, Tom Haviland is going to tell his story.
Last call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life.
As is my wont, I attended a meeting this past weekend of good citizens that are fighting for righteousness. And I kind of sifted through the crowd and talked to some folks. And I ran across a very interesting gentleman from Dayton, Ohio. His name is Tom Haviland. He's a 20-year Air Force veteran and 16 years as a defense contractor. And he did some research and came up with some very interesting facts, which he shared with his supervisor, a general, which ended up costing him his job. I want to bring Tom on now, if you would, Mr. Anderson. Tom Haviland, welcome to the last call.
Thanks, BJ.
Why I will not comply with the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Thomas S. Haviland, a free American citizen, will not comply with the COVID-19 vaccine mandates for two reasons. The data does not support me getting the vaccine, and it is morally wrong for the government to demand that I get injected with an experimental vaccine against my will, or else lose my rights as a free citizen. I want to get into that, Tom, but I want to get a little history here. You're a retired Air Force colonel. I'm sorry, major. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I did 20 years in the Air Force, retired as a major.
Okay. And then you went to work in Dayton as a defense contractor. Is that correct?
Correct. I've been working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base since I retired from the Air Force for 16 years for two separate companies.
Okay.
As a defense contractor.
And when you first started there, and I mean, there's been ups and downs in the business world. You were probably there. Let's see, if you've been 16 years. No, you weren't year 2K, but there's always issues and issues that are overcome, and then you pass and you go on. So was there any other issues prior to the COVID issue that caught your attention?
Not really. I have never been politically involved, or I've never had any reason to protest anything that my country's ever done. I love my country. And this is the first time in my 61 years of age that I've ever saw something that our government was doing that was so wrong, so unethical, that I needed to speak up.
How did you know it was wrong, and how did you know it was unethical?
Well, I guess that goes back to basically my life story. You know, I grew up as a young person really believing that individual liberty is the most precious thing, the highest guiding principle that our country has. And it eclipses anything, including safety. I bought into those stories I learned as a kid of the pilgrims coming over, to seek religious freedom.
Yes, ma'am.
Of our founding fathers in the Revolutionary War wanting to have their own government, be free men. So that was bred very, very dearly into me. Also, as a youth, I quickly discovered I was very good at math and doing data analysis. And
I hate people like you, by the way. I hate people like you. You made me look bad in school. Thanks. Go ahead.
But both of those things have actually helped prepare me for this moment. And through my whole career in the Air Force and then as a defense contractor, one of the key things I did as a data analyst was look at the information provided to us by contractors and make sure that data was sound, that it made sense, that it actually advocated the positions that were being taken before certain decisions were made. So that all of that kind of culminated, that love of country and that ability to do data analysis, which is something I love doing, kind of culminated in my ability, I think, to analyze this situation with the COVID mandates and come to what I think is a totally logical conclusion.
At the very least, data analyst, you're a dangerous man. At the very least, and I'm sure what you did before you ever did any kind of an action is you did analyze the situation. I read you wrote a letter to your colonel, or to the general that's you're under his command indirectly through consulting, and you listed some very interesting things that you did research, and maybe we ought to get into that first. What did you find in your research with regards to COVID?
Well, the first thing I always do is, instead of going to like biased information, for example, if I'm a conservative, I will not look at right-leaning information. What I want to do is actually go to the source of the proponents of the mandate themselves. In our case, it would be the CDC. Mm-hmm. Now, I found that the CDC was providing very little data. So I couldn't really get the kind of data that I needed out of our own CDC, which, first of all, put up some red flags for me, because our CDC should be putting out information about this, the pandemic, stratifying the what's happening at different age groups, what's happening between unvaccinated and vaccinated, partially vaccinated people. I could not find that information looking for our own CDC. Fortunately, there's a country that's fairly close to the U.S. in vaccination rates, and that country is UK, United Kingdom. So I looked what was going on in the United Kingdom, and I've discovered a technical briefing that they do every couple of weeks in England. It's put out by their version of the CDC. It's called Public Health England, and your listeners can actually look this up. They can Google this. So if the latest version that I looked at that time, before I wrote the letter that you're talking about, was Public Health England Technical Briefing number 23. And that was put out in about mid-September. And if you go to table 5 in that document, it's on pages 19 and 20. If you go to table 5, they take a look at all the Delta cases of COVID that took place in the UK between the 1st of February and the middle of September of this year. And there were about 600,000 cases. So that's a very large sample size. I like to work with data with large sample sizes. You can glean more honest conclusions out of larger sample sizes. So out of those 600,000 cases of Delta, I saw that there were 257,000 cases that were amongst the unvaccinated. So about half of those cases were cases of unvaccinated people. But what was stunning about that is, out of those 257,000 cases of unvaccinated people, there were only 722 deaths that occurred out of those people.
That's not to downplay 722 deaths, but comparatively speaking.
Absolutely not. But that's a case fatality rate of 0.28%. So less than 1/3 of 1%, almost just 1/4 of 1%. In that same table, there were 157,000 cases reported for fully vaccinated people. And of those 157,000 cases, over 1,600 people died. That's a case fatality rate of a little over 1%. So the case fatality rate for the fully vaccinated, according to the official numbers from the UK for the whole year of 2021, were 3 times that of the unvaccinated people. 1% case fatality rate for fully vaccinated versus 0.3% for unvaccinated. So that really perked me up. That said, wow, that's interesting information. In the same table, they also were comparing unvaccinated to vaccinated in terms of hospitalizations. Now, you recall over the last few months, we've heard a lot about, it's the unvaccinated that are taking up all the hospital beds, right? So this is the pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? Well, of those 600,000 cases of Delta that took place in the UK, 12,000 of them required an overnight hospital stay or more. That's about 2% of the population. That in itself is a kind of an interesting statistic, because I understand that recently our American people were polled to see what percentage of people they think that catch COVID actually have to get hospitalized. From what I understand, Democrats answer the question. They separate into Democrats versus Republicans. Democrats answer the question that they thought that as much as 50% of people who caught COVID had to be hospitalized. That's how misinformed our American public is. And you're not surprised when you see with the mass media, how they keep propping up this fear of COVID. But the actual percentage is about 2%. Only about 2% of people who catch COVID actually have to go to the hospital and stay overnight. That's whether it's in UK or here in the US. But what's interesting is of those 12,000 hospitalizations in UK, 6,000 were unvaccinated and 6,000 were fully vaccinated. It was a 50-50 split. It wasn't a 90-10 or a 99% were unvaccinated. So the claim that our TV folks have made that, hey, it's the unvaccinated that are taking up all the hospital beds is completely false. It just cannot be true. Furthermore, as you know, it's clear cut now that people who have even gotten the vaccinations, fully vaccinated people, can still catch COVID, can still transmit COVID to others. So the whole transmissibility argument, get the shot to protect others, goes completely away because they can carry just as high a viral load as the unvaccinated. So that argument goes away completely. So as I looked into this data, I could see that, hey, the numbers, the data, large populations are not saying what Dr. Fauci and the people on the TV are saying. What's interesting about that technical briefing 23 too from the Public Health England is if you look at the next version of that document, Public Health England technical briefing number 24, you'll see that table has disappeared. Even the Public Health England people, they can see the writing on the wall. They can see the data, even because the rest of their document, it's still very pro get the shot, pro get the vaccines. Yeah. They can see that their own table was disavowing what their message was in the rest of the document. So guess what they did? They eliminated the table from the document. It's gone now. You can't find. There's different table 5. It has completely different information in it. That's not related whatsoever.
You still have copies of that?
I have electronic copies. I actually I have electronic copies of technical briefings 19 through 23 that show the actual buildup. And I actually graphed it out. And you can see the curve starts to really go exponential vertical for the fully vaccinated in terms of deaths. So I can see why they stopped reporting it, because if they would have kept reporting it, you really would start to see the differences. So
we're going to take a break here in about a minute, Tom, but go ahead.
Okay. There's another document I found as well that's put out by the UK health people as well. It's called COVID-19 Surveillance Report number 44. And if you want me to, I can talk a little bit about that after the break.
Okay, yeah. Did you do any research with regards to Israel? And again, we got about 30 seconds, but did you do?
Well, yeah, I've looked at the documents that basically said that those people that have actually unvaccinated that caught COVID that recovered from it were about anywhere from 13 to 27 times as immune as people who were vaccinated. So natural immunity is 13 to 27 times better than just getting the vaccines.
Yeah, viruses morph. They morph and they change so they can survive.
That's right.
But and I mentioned earlier, I don't believe they evolve up. I believe they evolve down, or at least I'll just say down. I don't see any reason how. Second law of thermodynamics, things tend to disorder. So I don't see how they evolve up, and that's very important to know. Yeah, when we come back from break, I want to get more facts and figures. I want to know how long you gathered the facts and figures, and then what you did next. Did you share this with family and friends? Who did you share this information with? Who could you share this information with? BJ Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call with special guest Tom Haviland.
Last call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
Babylon B. But when we talk about this information, we talk about experts and Fauci, etc. But here's the headline from Babylon Bee. Doctor who spent decades in high school still too dumb to realize that he doesn't know everything. Dateline, Cleveland, Ohio, after spending over a decade in school, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a world-class degree in medicine, local doctor James Walduck is still too dumb to realize how very little he actually knows, sources say. I studied many medical texts and completed my residency, so I really know what I'm talking about, said the young man who was memorizing thousands of Pfizer-approved treatments for various ailments and can regurgitate medical knowledge on demand. I've learned all that there is to know in my field, and everyone should listen to me. Sources say he was taking on a lot of student debt to become a walking WebMD database that can recite the proper pills to give for every ailment. The young doctor knows very little about nutrition, exercise, or human nature, and has non-foundational worldview that provides a basis for him to think of human life as valuable. Still, he is convinced that his words should be the final word on all healthcare issues. This piece of paper on my wall says I'm really smart, says a young man who could easily be replaced by a kiosk that dispenses drugs. And if you don't listen to me, you're anti-science. Babylon Bee is it's supposed to be a spoof, but that could describe an awful lot of the White Castle doctors that we've been listening to.
Have you seen the Babylon? Have you seen the Babylon Bee take on the "Vaccinate Me Elmo" doll?
Yeah, I did.
That is awesome. It's funny, but it makes you want to cry at the same time.
Yep. It's just wow. These are just crazy, interesting times. We're speaking with Tom Haviland. He's got several decades experience in the service and worked at the Defense Supply Center. Was it Defense Supply Center in Dayton? Is that correct?
No, I worked for various Air Force fighter aircraft programs. I worked for the F-16, F-22, the F-117 stealth fighter over my career. It was a wonderful career. Really enjoyed it. Sad to leave it.
Yep. So let's talk about leaving. You've got all this information. You think you have enough to make at least a rational decision. So what did you do next with this information?
Well, back when President Biden first started talking about mandates for all the military and then for all the civilian federal employees, of which I was not one, but then he also included and lumped in all defense contractors, of which I am one. That was, I think, sometime back in around the August timeframe when the talk first started about that. I have an older sister who actually went with her daughter out to one of the local hospitals here in Dayton with some signs trying to encourage the doctors and nursing staff of that hospital that, hey, we're with you if you don't want to get the shot. It shouldn't, the vaccine should not be mandated. And I started thinking about that myself. And when my sister talked to me and I had a discussion on the phone with her, I actually became a little ashamed of myself for saying, Tom, you need to get out there and do something about this because I'm doing all this research. I'm finding all this data. I need to do something as well. By the way, in terms of data, let me give you one more piece of data. As I've said before the break, the COVID-19, if you look, people look at in Google, the UK COVID-19 surveillance report 44, which is actually even a more recent document. It actually talks about cases of the virus in the UK over the month of October. And this is interesting because they split it into the various age groups by each 10 years. So if you look, for example, UK, by the way, has a population of about, I think, 78,000 people. So about 78 million people. About 80 million people live in the UK. And during the month of October, during that 4-week period, they had about 1 million cases of Delta. So they had quite a few cases, about one. So one out of every, 70 people got COVID, which is a pretty large number. Keeping in mind, by the way, this country is about 80 to 90% fully vaccinated. The adults are. So that's kind of is telling in and of itself. But in one of the largest age group was the people between 40 and 49 years old. And in that age group of 40 to 49 years old, there were about 160,000 cases of COVID. And of that, there was about 15,000 that could not be accounted for, that could not be linked to either vaccinated or unvaccinated people. But of the ones they could link, the fully vaccinated had 130,000 cases of Delta. The unvaccinated had only 15,000 cases of Delta. Let me let that sink in again. Out of those 145,000 cases of Delta for the ages of 40 to 49-year-olds, 130,000 out of the 145,000 were breakthrough cases of fully vaccinated people. Only 15,000 of the 145,000 cases were cases of unvaccinated people.
Breakthrough is an interesting term. It's just a very interesting term, a very innocent term, as versus cases where the vaccine didn't work.
That's what they mean when they say breakthrough. The vaccine is not working.
Yeah,
it's not working as intended.
In situations where the vaccine doesn't work, in breakaway cases. Go ahead, Tom.
Right. So getting back to my story, like I said, I was a little ashamed that my sister had gone out and tried to encourage the people, the doctors and nurses at the hospital, and I hadn't done anything yet. So I took a 2-week vacation in mid-September when they were still just talking about the mandates. But I hadn't seen any kind of dates yet assigned to me, at least. And I said, I need to get out there. So I took that 2-week vacation and I went out to a very busy intersection here in Beaver Creek, Ohio for 14 days straight for the whole 2 weeks. And I carried a big sign and it just said very simply, no vax mandate. And I went to this very large intersection. It's got a Red Lobster and a Walmart and a Best Buy and a Lowe's and an Olive Garden. It's got like 4 lanes of traffic going each way with, 2 turn lanes. And what was great about this corner is across the street from where I stood was this gigantic American flag.
Yeah.
That I considered my buddy as I was out there.
Go team.
But I'll have to be honest with you. The first day that I made the sign and I took it down to the corner, I was scared. Like I said, I've never protested anything before. I love my country, but something in me, some calling in me said, you need to do this. And I knew I wasn't just going to hold the sign. I knew I was going to yell. I was going to challenge people in the cars. I was going to say, honk for freedom. Basically, if you want the shot, get the shot. If you don't want the shot, don't get the shot. But it's your choice, not theirs. You decide, not them. That was my message. And what I found over the next 14 days, I probably saw about 100,000 cars go by me. And since then, I've gone out there more days, and probably it's closer now to 150,000 to 200,000 cars that I've seen in the 27 or 28 days I've been out there. But out of every 100 cars that goes by, I would say about 80 of the cars do nothing. People are either too busy with their day, or they're scared to, do anything, or they're just don't care. And I would get about maybe 2% of the people would give me a middle finger or say F you, or, get the shot, that kind of thing. But about a full 20% of people, about 1/5 of the people would cheer wildly or honk their horns or give me a thumbs up, and I could just see the relief on these people's face that they said, finally, somebody else out here in public that feels the way I do. And just the sheer joy and relief I could see on these people's faces, I went out there to kind of encourage and inspire them, but they wound up really encouraging and inspiring me. Mm-hmm. Then as I went out there day after day, I couldn't wait to get out there. And every day I would go out there, I'd stand for about 5 or 6 hours. I'd try to get out there at about 11 in the morning so I could hit the lunch crowd that comes by at noon. And then also I'd take maybe a little break for about a half hour in the afternoon, but then come back so I could catch the traffic going home at night after work. And it was just so fulfilling to see these people. And especially when they're stopped at the corner and they're waiting for their turn, the lights, you have to wait your turn and when it's time to go and turn and stuff. And I'd have conversations with them. And you would not believe how many people either themselves or had loved ones that were in the same situation that I was, that, I'm going to have to give up my job in a few weeks, or I have to make a decision about whether to get the jab that I don't want to get, but I still need to feed my family. I really, really felt for these people. So, and at least once or twice a day, during every single one of these days, someone would get out of their car, walk down to the corner, shake my hand, ask me if I needed a bottle of water, and then tell me their story. So as this is all happening, I am just getting more and more positive feedback that these people are awesome people. They're great. We're talking doctors, nurses, firemen, military people from the base. The intersection I was doing this at was not too far from the Air Force Base. I get these military people who, young guys and gals who don't want to get the shot, but are having to do so, or else they have to give up their career. And it's sinister. And that just emboldened me more. So then it came the time when we received the emails where we were all given our dates. And for me, the original date was 8 December that I had to get the shot. I had to be fully vaccinated by. And that's when I wrote a response to this letter from this general.
So the general sent out a letter to basically all employees or all people who were working at the base. Is that correct?
Correct. And in that letter, he put, here's the deadline for the military. And they were already undergoing, the military deadline was sooner. So military were already starting to get their vaccinations and their dates were more urgent because they had a deadline of sometime in November to be fully vaccinated. The government civilians had I think a deadline sometime in later November, and then defense contractors, we had a deadline of 8 December, which now has been pushed back, I understand, to 4 January, but it's still a sword of Damocles hanging over these people's head.
Yep. And so you decided that you were going to take the next step, put your job at risk, and for those listening today, hope you're strapped in. You're talking about a job that's paying you over $165,000 a year.
That's correct.
You're about to put it at risk. Okay.
And I didn't want to retire at 61. I wanted to retire at 65 after I get my last daughter through college. She hasn't started college yet. She'll be starting next year. So the good news is that my wife and I I've made enough money over the years to be able to handle that and absorb that.
Okay.
But it still was a difficult decision for me to make, but.
Well, my goodness. Yes. I mean, come on. I mean, we're not talking small change here.
No.
And you're also talking about change, period. And that's difficult for people to handle. And you knew that you had to tell the truth, not just to the base commander, but you wanted to let other people know, share the information that you've done the research on, and tell them this is what you might be facing if you go ahead and follow the orders, I don't know whether you call them direct orders, but the orders of the commander, the head, the CEO of the company, in essence, and say, well, wait a minute, this is wrong. This has happened in the past, by the way. That's how we stopped racism. That's how we stopped discrimination.
Right. Because
good people like Tom stood up and said, whoa, wait a minute. This is wrong. I've done the research, and this is where we really need to take a good hard look. It's a choice. It's a healthcare choice. So we go back from break. I want you to get a little bit into the letter, but I'm gonna give a preview to the folks who we've been on for a while. Tom acted upon the information and acted upon his desire to share righteousness with the world. And as a result of that, he lost a very good job, one he was very comfortable with. And we're going to get into details of that after the break. BJ Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. Hang in there with us, Tom.
Why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that didn't protect the protected in the first place? Why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that didn't protect the protected in the first place?
Tom, if you can, in 5 minutes, share the conclusion to what happened here, how you did it, and who you directed it to. If you can do that in 5 minutes, we've got Sam on the line that wants to add to the conversations. But please go ahead. You've gathered all this information. You've decided you're going to take the next step. You're not tired of being on the street corner, but you want to do more than being on the street corner and getting honking horns. And you really care about the people you're working with. So your next step is?
The next step was to write a letter, or respond to the letter from the general with a letter that I wrote and sent to the entire Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. For those of you who are not familiar with the Wright-Pat Air Force Base, it has about 30,000 people. It's the largest single-site employer in the state of Ohio.
30,000.
30,000. And I can't guarantee that my email made it to everybody on the base because they quickly tried to pull it back off the email system after it got out there. But I know a lot of people saw it because afterwards, as I've been standing on the corner with my sign over the past weeks, many people have said, I saw your email, and they're out of their cars. I saw your email. I read your email. I saved it. I saved it before they deleted it.
Share it then. Share it.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the letter for you in a second. But the reason I wrote the letter is like again, I said, as I thought back as when I was a kid and learning all that history about all the daringness that our four founding fathers took, as they knew that they were pledging their lives, their sacred lives to each other.
They lost everything. They lost everything.
Yes.
They're all.
They risked it all. And I'm just talking about risking maybe a few years of extra money, and having an early retirement. I knew I was going to be. So my sacrifice pales in comparison to those that have, that stormed the beaches of Normandy. Can you imagine the kids, 18-year-old kids going to Normandy?
17, 18, yeah.
17, 18-year-old kids. So let me read for you the letter that I wrote.
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it.
My response to the general, in which I CC'd the entire 30,000 people on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. To my Wright-Patterson Air Force Base co-workers, I write this and provide the attached document as encouragement to you. I want you to know that you are not alone if you feel that you've been wronged by not being allowed to make your own decision on whether to get the COVID-19 vaccines or not. The mandate is flat out wrong. The data does not support it, and it's also morally wrong. It is sinister of our government to insist that you get the vaccine or else lose your job and other civil rights. I understand that many of you are between a rock and a hard place. You don't want to get the vaccine, but you feel that you are in no position to say no because you really need your job to support you and your family. However, there comes a point when we need to make a stand against tyranny. Telling you that you must inject an experimental vaccine into your body is about as bad as it gets.
And by the way, Tom, you included the research that you did from Britain, et cetera. You included that with the email.
That's an attachment.
You gave them objective information to look at. Go ahead.
That's correct. I encourage all, and that's about a 4-page document in and of itself.
Yep.
I encourage all of you to dig deep inside you and find that courage that is within all of us. I cannot make your decision for you, and I cannot guarantee that we will win. But I do know that if enough of us stand, then they will rescind this awful mandate. Some in leadership have tried to give you the impression that almost everyone has no problems getting the vaccine and that you are the oddball out if you are vaccine hesitant. Let me tell you right now that this is the furthest thing from the truth. How do I know this? Some of you at Wright-Pat Air Force Base have seen me lately. I'm the guy that spent my 2-week vacation in September and the first 2 weekends in October at the stoplight on Fairfield Road by the Red Lobster off of I-675, holding the sign saying no vax mandate. For the 18 days, over 100 hours that I've been out there, I estimate that I've watched over 100,000 cars go by me. Sure, many of the cars don't do anything, and about 1% will give me a middle finger or say F you. But a significant number, about 20%, cheer wildly, honk their horns, or give me a thumbs up. What is interesting is to see that when most of the cars are stopped at the light, awaiting their turn to go, when the first car starts to honk, it gives courage to the other drivers to start honking their horns.
That'll preach. That'll preach. Go ahead.
Soon, many cars are letting the entire intersection know exactly how they feel about this rotten mandate. Furthermore, every single day that I've been out there, people, including doctors, nurses, teachers, clergy, firemen, have taken the time to park their car and walk down to the corner to shake my hand or offer me a bottle of water. I know that this stated work policy of not asking people about their vaccination status has been to protect your medical privacy. But I think there's also had a consequence of isolating each one of us so that we can never talk to our fellow coworkers about how we really feel about things like masks, social distancing, and vaccine mandates. We were never really allowed to talk about these things together, so we never really had the opportunity to start honking our horns together if we disagreed with any policy. Again, for those of you who despise this vaccine mandate, I want you to know that you are not alone. As for me, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
Now, wait a minute. Before you go any further, there's a close you have here. And I want to, this is basically the difference between interested and committed. This next sentence is going to tell you how committed Tom is. Go ahead, Tom. Your last sentence.
My PS for Lieutenant General Schaefer. Remember, this is a 3-star general on the Air Force Base. You should be ashamed of yourself. You failed us. Instead of fighting for our right to choose for ourselves whether to get injected with an experimental vaccine, you spent your time trying to guilt us who are unvaccinated into getting the vaccine. Shame on you.
I'm surprised you weren't arrested and put in chains.
Well, about 30 minutes after the email was sent, I did receive a telephone call saying that I had been fired from my job. The general called my employer and had me fired very quickly.
Oh, my goodness.
It was not a surprise.
That's just crazy. That's just crazy. I'm going to try to bring Sam on if we can get Sam in here.
I'm
Sam,
here.
are you with us?
Yes.
Yes. Hey, what do you think?
First of all, Mr. Haviland, can you hear that?
Thank you.
That is amazing. That is just fantastic. I'm proud of you. We need more people like you, but they are rising up and they are waking up, and I am encouraged by that.
Me too.
My situation is very similar, and I have to say, you and we agree on everything you've said and done much of the same that you have done. So I'm glad to know that there are others out there in other cities. I know that there are, but just to hear it, firsthand, I just think it's fantastic. Well, I'll start my story if that's okay, and I'll try to make it brief. So
we got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
5 minutes? Okay.
Yep.
So I took on a job a few months ago, and as I had applied for this job, it wasn't until after I applied that they mandated their employees to be vaccinated. Well, I never heard back from my application, so I wasn't too concerned about it. And then I received an email about this mandate, and the job that I applied for was a work-at-home position, but they were informing me that even that position requires the vaccine, and they wanted me to respond to that. Well, I didn't because, like I said, I had not heard back from them regarding my application to begin with, so I figured it didn't matter. About a week later, I received an email from them and they wanted to do an interview. It shocked me. And I'm thinking, oh no, they think I'm agreeing with this vaccine. That's why now they're contacting me because I didn't respond. Well, long story short, I got the job. I never said anything about the vaccine and no one said anything to me until I received the official offer letter, and it was all in there. Well, I had planned ahead. And I had received a religious exemption, beautiful, professionally done letter from a ministry that I have followed for years. So I was already prepared. Well, I start working. I turned all that information in that they required about my exemption. And lo and behold, I received more documents in the mail a few weeks later that I had to fill out, turn back in. And that's what I'm going to get to here real quick. They give you a handful of questions. They don't give you enough room to adequately respond to those questions. So I ended up writing my own letter. But let me just point out a couple of questions and show you how they word this. They say, please describe how the sincerely held religious beliefs are practiced. Now, listen, in conflict with the ability to perform your duties or meet your job requirements. I'm not the one that has the conflict. Okay. You agree with that? And then another question was, please identify any accommodation you feel could be provided to resolve the conflict between your belief. There is no conflict. As far as I'm concerned, they're the ones in conflict with me. So I responded, I filled out those little small sections the best of my ability, but then I also wrote my own letter to them. And I kind of turned their words around on them subtly to show them that I'm not the one with the conflict. And here it goes. So I said, to whom it may concern, thank you for following up with me regarding my religious exemption request as pertaining to the COVID-19 vaccine. I do appreciate the opportunity to explain in further detail as to why I have declined to receive this shot. As a practicing Christian, I believe strongly in the Word of God. My worship to God is first and foremost in my life. I walk in faith daily by heeding His Word, praying to Him, listening to His Holy Spirit, being obedient to what Holy Spirit reveals to me, and by sharing His message of hope and love and the forgiveness of sin with others when the opportunity arises. Now, God's word says that my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit and that I am not to grieve the Holy Spirit. Grieving the Spirit comes in many forms, some of which are walking in consistent disobedience, disregarding the truth, not taking care of my physical self, all of which are sin, and many other things. God's word also says that I am to fear not. The Holy Bible contains 365 verses that say fear not. As another form of worship to God, I walk by faith 365 days a year, fearing not. I believe it is up to everyone to make their own healthcare decisions as they see fit. What seems right to one person may not seem right to another. As for me, I adhere to the strongly held conviction not to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. I have sought I have sought God in prayer, and I believe that the Holy Spirit has kept me from it. I cannot explain why that is. I just know that I must be obedient to His direction and guidance for my own life. God has never steered me wrong. If I were to act in disobedience disobedience to His direction regarding this situation or any other situation for that matter, my relationship with God would be in conflict. Am I running out of time?
You got a couple, 3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll get it done. Okay, I'm almost done. You see, my relationship with God makes me the person He wants me to be. I admit that I am not perfect, but ever growing if I walk in consistent obedience to Him. My relationship with God makes me that person who gives of myself to help others. My relationship with Him makes me a better parent, a better daughter, a better friend, a better neighbor. And my relationship with God results in me being a good and loyal employee, giving my best in all that I do because I know that He is watching. When Jesus said that He came to give me more abundant life, I believe Him wholeheartedly because He has. Now, I have said all of that to say this. I do not believe that my sincerely held religious beliefs are in any way conflicted with my ability to perform my duties. My duties are performed remotely and professionally from my place of residence. Therefore, I do not require anything special to fulfill my responsibilities except for the equipment that you have provided to me to assist the members when they call and inquire about their benefits. Furthermore, I do not believe that my choice to decline the COVID-19 vaccine has any bearing on my job performance. Hence, no conflict. I hope you understand that I am not acting in direct defiance to you by declining the COVID-19 vaccine, but rather in faith to God. Please consider all that I have said and believe that I am a great asset to your organization. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share my faith with you. And, I think that sums it all up in the way that they worded their questions. I turned it around on them because I'm not the one in conflict. They are. And I encourage everyone who listened to that, don't give in to that ideal. Don't receive that you are the one with the conflict.
Right.
They are the one with the conflict. Keep it real, keep it subtle, keep it professional. And I will tell you, I mailed that off in the mail. Like I said, I had already turned in my religious exemption letter that I had received from a ministry. I mailed all this in, And then I got concerned about whether or not it was going to arrive in time. So I emailed it as well. 2 hours after the email, I received an email from them, from the Advice Council. And they told me that they were happy to tell me that they could receive my religious exemption.
Amen. Listen, we're going to have to take a break. You're welcome to hang on and follow up with that, Tom. If you want to please hang on for the next hour, family hour. B.J. Edwards along Mr. Anderson. This is your last call.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with B.J. Edwards.
And we're back. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. What do you think about all this, Mr. Anderson? Hey, this is B.J. Edwards along Mr. Anderson. You listen to hour number 2 of Last Call. We have Mr. Tom Haviland and Sam on the line with us, and they've been relating their stories about businesses and the harassment and the segregation and the discrimination that is happening against people that primarily Christians. But if you care about your own health care and about your family's health care, it doesn't make any difference. The government is going to make from cradle to grave. The government, that's the whole design. They're going to make all the decisions for you. And if you don't stand up like Tom and like Sam and like other folks like myself and Mr. Anderson, you're going to get what you deserve. You're going to get what you deserve. What do you think, Mr. Anderson, about all this?
I'm just very impressed with people who will.
What? Go team. Go team.
Courage is the key. And courage doesn't always come easy. We're afraid. We're all afraid of something. It shouldn't be. Fear is not of the Lord. But
you're not coming across, Mr. Anderson, for some reason.
You know why I'm not coming across?
Because you didn't
hear all my rhetoric went by.
Yep.
maybe they heard a shadow of it over your mic, but yeah, I got to turn mine on. But
this is
courage.
This is my
courageous.
technician, folks. This is my technician.
This is your...
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I got 2 hands and 3 things to do. Yeah, courage. Just watched that film recently, Christian film called Courageous, which kind of comes in line of being able to stand up and stand for that righteousness in your family, and starting there and bringing the family on board with what is right and understanding that. I'm hearing testimony from 2 very courageous individuals here, and very, very impressed, very encouraged.
That's probably Fox News trying to call you, Tom. Well, they want to get you on the show. Yeah, that's probably what's happening. Yeah.
CNN,
sure.
Maybe.
Yeah. You're not going to make either one of them. We're speaking with Tom Haviland, and Tom worked in for the government. It doesn't make any difference. He worked for a company, and he was fired from a very well-paying job for doing the research and questioning and asking about why is all this happening when this is here and that's there. Again, we're in a one-sided conversation today. It's just absolutely crazy.
Actually, he was doing what his leadership should have been doing all along.
Oh, shame on you, Mr. Anderson. Shame.
Absolutely. They really did fail us. First of all, I want to say, if Sam's still on, that was beautiful what you wrote. I really loved every word of it, especially the ending. It was just, I want to applaud you, Sam. Just wonderful. As a person who's done this myself, I know that it takes a lot of courage to do that, to stand up for yourself. But as I said earlier, our founding fathers and so many before us have sacrificed so much more than we have. This is the least we can do. And I'm sure that Sam has people that she loves and cares for. I have, 3 children that I want to see grow up in freedom. I don't want to see them grow up in tyranny. And if they can tell you, if the government can tell you what you must put inside your body, an experimental vaccine, and these vaccines are, first of all, they can't really be called vaccines because they're really therapeutics now. Yeah. They're not vaccines because vaccines are supposed to prevent you from catching the disease, not mitigate it once you catch it. But these vaccines still allow you to catch it and spread it to others. But the fact that, that we don't know how long they last, we don't know how effective they are, we don't know exactly about all the long-term side effects, especially of the two vaccines that are the mRNA vaccines. These are definitely fall into the experimental category. And guess who's the guinea pigs? The entire human race, the 5 billion people who have taken this stuff.
And they act more like drugs, because drugs, like if you get a drug to keep bacteria out of your system, it'll work for a little while, but then you got to take another pill.
Right.
And then you got to take another pill.
Exactly. A drug, a therapeutic. But the point is we've got children, and if they can tell us, to me, this is one of the most egregious invasions on our civil liberties and in our individual liberty. Like I said, and some people have placed safety above individual liberty. And like I said, safety really, people are under a misconception that this thing is a lot more dangerous than it actually is. Like I said, from the numbers I cited earlier, case fatality rates are much smaller than people think, etc. So if we let them get this foothold on tyranny, what will they ask us to do next? What will they make us do next? This is the time to make a stand. This is the time for our generation to make a stand.
Such a time as this. There's no justification for taking away an individual's freedom in the guise of public safety. Thomas Jefferson said that many, many years ago. The founders knew this was coming. They talked about it. And they said specifically, I think Benjamin Rush said it specifically, we should not have anything, any law, any ordinance, anything at all that puts public health above individual liberties. Mr. Anderson, are you going to say something?
Well, I was, but it's not really. I was just going to say I had seen statistics where the flu last year had actually killed more than the COVID.
I mean, where are you getting the information from? Here's what I.
Me?
Yeah. Well, anybody. When I walked out of the house in 2020 in March, and in April and May and June and July and August, I never once had to step over bodies to get to my car. It just never happened. And there weren't bodies as I was driving along the road. I never had to swerve away for bodies lying in the road. And when I entered buildings, there weren't bodies there. I mean, to hear the fear that's going out there, I got to tell you about one courageous act that I did, Tom. You'll love this. You'll love this. When this first started, and it was around that March time frame, I'm going, okay, I gotta go to Costco. Okay. And, I really don't want to wear a mask, but maybe they're going to ask me to, but from the health standpoint, I probably ought to wear a mask and gloves. So I decided to brave it. I just wore gloves and I didn't wear a mask. And I was scared. I mean, I was really scared. And then the second time I went out, same thing, gloves, no mask. And then a week or two went by and I'm going, you know what? I think I'm going to take the gloves off. And I took the gloves off. And for the past year and a half, I've been running around without a mask and without gloves on. How brave am I?
You're very brave. Well,
Yeah.
The thing that I think is that I learned in my defense contractor career is that part of my job as a defense contractor was to look at proposals from the primary defense contractor, which was Lockheed Martin, based out of Fort Worth, Texas. They have a gigantic plant there that actually produces fighter aircraft and then actually modifies fighter aircraft as well. So when they want to do a contract, I've been working in a couple of programs with foreign military sale customers who are upgrading their jets, getting new electronics on their jets, etc. And the contracts coming through us, the government people have to take a look at the proposals that come in from Lockheed and then judge whether they think the number of labor hours proposed in those contracts are fair or not. So that was one of the jobs that I did that nobody else seemed to want to do at the base, but I actually enjoyed doing these things. So I would take a look at these proposals that had as many as like 600 tasks on them. And I would review each of the tasks to see whether that was a fair number of labor hours the company was charging for that task. And I would use their own data against them a lot of times if I found what I thought were an exorbitant number of hours that were being bid, overall, they were a very fair company, and overall, the bids were in pretty good shape. But once in a while, I'd find a test. Hey, wait a minute, that's overbid. And by your own logic, using your own logic against you and your own data against you, I challenge you that I think you can get this done in fewer number of hours. Well, that's exactly the same approach that I took when I started analyzing the data for how I felt about COVID. And I didn't look at, like I said, right-wing leaning sites that, that I as a conservative would love, and we get all this biased feedback from. I actually went to the sites of the people that are promoting getting the vaccines. I went to the CDC site. I went to UK Public Health England site. I went to the Ohio coronavirus dashboard that Governor DeWine and Amy Acton set up. I went to the COVID-19 worldometer that the World Health Organization set up. And I looked at that data. I looked at their data and used their own data against them, because the data was showing that we are right and they're wrong. That's why I want the people out there to know that this is not only a thing, as Sam said, where you're morally right, religiously right to be against these mandated vaccines, but you're also, the data is in our corner. The data does not show that these vaccines are effective, and that if anything, they may be of use for people that are over 70 years old and have comorbidities, but for the young and healthy, these vaccines are not necessary. The data conclusively shows that. Their data conclusively shows that. So, for example, the Ohio coronavirus dashboard, if you go in there and you look under the key metrics tab, you'll see there's a mortality tab underneath there, and they've got the Ohio COVID deaths broken down. And I think we've had about 20, somewhere between 26 and 27,000 deaths in Ohio since COVID-19 started. If you look at that, you'll see that over 70% of those deaths are of people 70 years old or older. About 45% of those deaths are actually people 80 years old or older. So the average age of death of somebody dying in Ohio from COVID-19 is 78 years old. 78 years old. Do you know what the average age of death of the average American is? Before COVID? 79 years old.
Yeah.
So we're talking about people probably dying with COVID, that, COVID may have pushed them over the edge and they had comorbidities and were going to die soon anyways. So when people tell you, oh my gosh, the numbers, and they come back, well, I think today we'll probably go over the 800,000 mark in U.S. deaths for COVID. I think when I looked at the worldometer this morning, it was 799,000 people have died in the U.S. of COVID since the start of the pandemic a year and a half ago. But what they don't realize, what Americans don't realize, is out of 330 million people in this country, an average of about 3 million people die every year of natural causes. So in the 20 months that we've had since this thing first started, probably over 5 million people would have died naturally had COVID never existed. So you have to put things in perspective, right? You have to put, like I said, so we've got 800,000 deaths, but 800,000 deaths, but 5 million people die normally over this time period, from things like heart disease, old age, right? Cancer, other causes. So you have to put things in perspective. And like I said, again, the average age of death is 78 years old. If it's that way in Ohio, it's probably close to 78 years old all over the US. And that's only 1 year different than the average age of death before coronavirus ever hit. So you have to keep these things in perspective. You have to understand the math in order to understand the actual risk that's going on out there. And what's really criminal, I think, is the fact that they want to vaccinate our kids now. Kids from 0 to 19 years old, they are in a survival rate category of COVID of 99.999%.
But wait a minute, Tom. Wait a minute. Hold it.
Yeah.
There's a new variant coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell you right now that this is aimed at a certain market. It's going to be those young ladies that got pregnant and didn't get the shot, and their newborns. That's what they're going after. They've got it down to 5 years old. The next step is two things are happening here. And I wrote a little bit about this, and may get into it after we take a break. The two things that are happening here is they're going after them. And then in January, they're really going to put the clamp down again, because they want everybody wearing a mask and everybody to get a shot. And for you to be able to buy or sell that's going to have to happen. Okay.
And they want to keep the fear factor up too. If
Well, yeah.
people are not scared of Delta anymore, then we got to have a new variant out there to get the whole public ginned up and ramped up again in fear.
After we take a break, what would have happened if, and I'll address this to you, Tom, but anybody else that wants to call in, what would have happened if we had just treated this like we do any normal virus or flu and maybe developed herd immunity? Where would we be today? Would we still be 2 years with the same COVID, or would we have gone beyond that? I'm not even going to talk about the loss of lives and jobs that have happened because of this. I'm not even going to talk about that.
Last Call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
And Tom Haviland, I'm going to get into a discussion about family because Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up events, and there's a tension, a line being drawn. But before I do that, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Do you remember me in the past on this show, regular listeners, about after the holidays, the press will be back on the 2020 type mandates, and the supposing that the market for the religion of COVID, and by the way, COVID is a religion. It is a religion based upon, listen to what Thomas said and what other people are putting out there. You have to have more faith in COVID and the doctors than you do in Jesus Christ. You really do, because it just doesn't make sense, in my humble opinion, of course. Well, I don't know whether this is related or not, but a new COVID-19 variant was just recently identified in South Africa. And of course, public health experts across the globe are already issuing dire warnings, supposedly a high number of mutations and increased transmissibility, especially among young people. Some are even warning the new strain could prove to be more dangerous than the Delta variant. There is talk of exponential rise. The most heavily mutated version of the virus we've seen. It is, and it should be. And it may be more transmissible than the Delta strain, and that current vaccines may be less effective against it. This is according to Time magazine. Yet, South African scientists are presently working to determine the percentage of new cases that were caused by the new variant. In other words, they don't know. They haven't even done the count yet, but they're assuming the count. You know what we want you to think this is going to be worse, that it's going to be more transmissible, yada yada yada. We want you to think that, so we're going to put this out. You know what you want once you first hear, and you grab onto that, it takes 1,000 times counter information for you to be able to turn that around. So they're already planting the seed, and they're going to be watering it. And I could go on, but basically what I think is going to happen, what I told Tom, is first of the year, the really clamp is going to come down, and people that haven't been taking it, and that's going to include those for their babies, are going to be forced by their family members, by the government, by businesses, to go ahead and get the experimental drug treatment, which it is. We can see that the variant is potentially spreading very fast. We do not expect to start seeing pressure in the healthcare system. We do expect to start to see pressure in the healthcare system in the next few days and weeks. That's from Tulio de Oliveira of the Network for Genomic Surveillance in South Africa, whatever genomic surveillance is. So let's talk about the family, Tom, and how it's affecting the family. And more importantly, how do you react to that? I mean, it's a gloves on, tape on the mouth, don't say anything during Thanksgiving and Christmas. But those that believe in the COVID get their shots in, and you have to remain silent. You just can't say a word. I don't have a solution to this, but I'm bringing it up as an issue because this is going on and has to stop. And you say?
Yeah, before we get there, just a quick note. When you posited, BJ, about what would have been like had we handled this thing differently just before the break, fortunately, there was one country who did that, Sweden. Yes. Sweden decided not to lock down. They decided they didn't require masks. Sweden, interestingly, is a country that's got a population of about 12 million people, which is about the same size as Ohio and Michigan. Ohio and Michigan also have about 12 million people apiece. So you can compare the three of them to see what's happening. Ohio and Michigan, Ohio, like I said, has had about 26,500 deaths to date from COVID. Sweden's only had, I think, about 17,000. They've done better. Even though they did not require masks, even though they did not lock down their society, they've done better overall. And in this most current wave that they've had a significant amount of success in terms of very, very few deaths. So I suspect that what happened in Sweden is that a lot of the population caught COVID the first time around as it went through. And those people then became naturally immune to the point now where the number of cases and the recovery rates are much better for COVID than they are for those of us in the US who got vaccinated instead and have less powerful immunity than those who obtained natural immunity through actually catching and recovering from COVID. So we'll see how it plays out. But that's one of the reasons that our mass media has been very silent about Sweden. They're very, very silent because they know that Sweden really damages their cases for the vaccine because Sweden has done so well. So let's talk about family now. This is near and dear to my heart. As I told you in a pre-conversation, BJ, the other night, my younger sister had invited me and the rest of the whole family, about 40 people in an email, to attend a Christmas celebration the week before Christmas. I think the party is going to be on the 18th of December. And I actually sent an email to the people attending the party. I sent an email reply to all, asking people whether or not they are in favor of the vaccine mandates or not. I tried to stress upon them the importance of being against the mandates because they are so tyrannical. And this is an issue that I believe is not one of those issues where people can agree to disagree on. Because if you're on the side of supporting the mandates, you might as well be the one pushing the plunger into somebody's arm.
Or the one that fired you.
Yeah, the one that fired me. Right. Because you're being put, you're definitely on the side of evil. So this is where I know people are the first thing you want to do if you want to maintain family harmony is, like you say, is to keep your mouth shut, stay quiet, and just talk about pleasantries. And I know you're not supposed to talk about politics and those kind of things over the Thanksgiving table.
But it's there. It's daggone it. It's there. And for evil to flourish, good men need only say nothing. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You got me all fired up.
You got me. And that's exactly what I did. My response in asking people to declare whether they're pro or anti-mandate has basically all heck is breaking loose in my family, because I've got people on both sides of the issue, and my younger sister is upset because she wants me to come to the party, but I'm right at now, I plan on not going. And I've got other family members who are on my side, you're on my side, they're against the mandates, but they still want to go and try to reach those that are not. Yep. And have discussions with them. And, the whole thing just it ruins the fun, festive atmosphere of what should be a happy family gathering, right? But I think back to Nazi Germany back in the days. Let's say you're a German person and you're having have a conversation with your best friend, and your best friend says all of a sudden, I think that Jews deserve to get treated like they're being treated. Maybe it's after Kristallnacht or something like that, or maybe it's a Civil War time, before the Civil War, and you're from the North and you have a relative who lives in the South, and the person that your loved one in the South says, I think it's all right for people to own slaves because they're subhuman people. They're not human. They're subhuman. Yeah. Do you want to continue a relationship with a person like that thinks and supports that kind of evil? And I know those are two drastic cases I'm citing. And a lot of people say, well, you can't equate vaccine mandates to that kind of situation, like the Jews in Nazi Germany or the blacks who were being held slaves. And those are dramatic situations. I'm not saying they're not. They are. But this is a dramatic situation too. the unvaccinated are being treated as the other. And you can see it. You can see if you look and see what's happening in Australia, if you're not blinding yourself to what's going on in Australia, camps being erected and people being taken out to these quarantine camps way out in the wilderness because they're not vaccinated. Or what's happening in Austria, where they're going to mandate everybody get the shot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Every single citizen is going to have to get the shot. And you can't avoid it.
No SAM religious exemptions?
Nothing. It's tyranny. And you would think Austria would know better. They were in the heart of what I was talking about with the whole Jewish situation.
There's a fellow by the name of Adolf is from Austria.
Yeah, they don't seem to remember history. And now, we talk about those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And what really scares me, BJ, is that you and I grew up in an era when we learned history. We learned that love of country.
Yes,
we learned that we loved our founding fathers. We loved those stories of the covered wagons going west, about how freedom had to be fought for, how the people were courageous. I'm not sure that the people are courageous anymore. I'm not sure they understand the preciousness of our individual liberties that so many people before us laid the groundwork for so we could have.
They don't discern.
So I ask you, what do you think? Do you think that our next generation, not your and my generation, but our younger generations, are they prepared to go to bat for individual liberty and freedom?
Tom, I'm afraid what's going to happen, and we got about 4 more minutes, and then we're going to take a break, and then we've got a video clip, a couple of video clips we want to play, very important video clips, and you're welcome to stay on board with them. But in terms of, I know what taught me, and that was pain. And I mean, I'm an entrepreneur by nature, and God would throw something in my life, and he wouldn't verbally speak to me, but I know he was sending a message to me. He says, "Well, okay, was that enough pain for you, BJ?" And I'm going, "Well, no, maybe you're going to have to try a little harder." He does, and he can, and that's what we're trying to avoid is the pain that's going to be inflicted upon your sister, your family, your community, your church. And it's coming, right. And we see it, and we're desperately doing whatever we can. And it looks a little strange. I mean, what do you mean you're not going to go to your sister? What do you say? What do you mean you called your base commander? What does the matter with you? Why can't you just get along, Tom? Come on, why can't you just get along?
Right, you're absolutely right, because we see the evil. You and I see the evil, and if a person doesn't have anything to lose, then they're less likely to get on board. But if I threaten, I know this is a horrible, harsh thing, but if I threaten to break off my relationship with my younger sister over this issue, she knows she's going to lose something. And that might make her think twice about her position and the fact that she's supporting these evil mandates. And if she can see that, if I can get her to see that, then we might, as a society, be able to avoid the tyranny, right? If enough people see it and stand up against it, then we can avoid the tyranny. But enough of us need to recognize it and stand up against it.
Yep. I can remember when I was an executive recruiter, and I used this ploy. I learned it well. We're speaking to Tom Haviland. He was fired from a very well-paying job in Dayton, Ohio, because he searched the truth and found the truth. And Tom, thanks for being on with us today. When I was an executive recruiter, I learned one thing to do. And that when a candidate was kind of wishy-washy about whether he's going to accept a position or not, I take it away from him. Okay, well, we'll just forget about that position and we'll go over here and look for something else. And you're going to hear, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't say that, or okay. And that's what we're doing. That's what God is doing actually with us. Are you going to see this, or do I have to give you something else even more costly? It's such a shame. Tom, I appreciate you. Sam, I appreciate you. And again, you're welcome to stay tuned and listen to it's about a 25-minute video about a doctor in Houston and how anyone who is basically trying to tell the truth like you and has expertise like you, they have to be gotten rid of. They can't be allowed to have a place on the stage. And we, the other folks, need to demand that you have a place on the stage. Tom, God bless you. Godspeed. We'll talk further. I got people I want to connect you up with and get you in even further trouble.
Thank you, BJ. Really enjoy being on the show.
All right, buddy. Well, we as well. Yep. This is BJ Edwards along Mr. Anderson. We're going to play a quick video for you about somebody else that's standing up and they're doing something. Look, you don't know until you run the play whether it's going to work or not. And you have to keep
segregation based off of your own fears and your own personal interests. The people in this country have had enough, and we are fighting back. I have something to give you. Security, would you do me a favor? Would you please hand those forms to the board members starting with Jar? You have been officially served a $200 million lawsuit with 6 complaints and violations under multiple amendments. Your job is not to be concerned with the children's health. You're not nurses. You're not doctors. You are not responsible for their health organization. Your only focus is on our children's education. Yet the education system here is 50th in the state, and you make almost more money than anybody else. It is very clear that you have failed at doing that job. This country is not alone. It's time that we wake up, and we're going to give you lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. You can throw it out as much as you want, but we're going to keep this paperwork on your desk and keep a problem going until we get exactly what we want. This is not a negotiation. We will have our freedom of choice, and we're going to see you in court.
Your laugh is disgusting.
handing summons. They're being handed summons. Public school boards across the country seem to think that they're the ultimate authority over students, not the parents. By the way, a good part of that reason is, as parents, we've led them to believe that. We've allowed them to do that. We send them off to government-run institutions, trust them, and then they send us back complete strangers 12 years later or 16 years later, however long you want to put them through this. It appears that most school boards have prioritized flexing their bureaucratic muscles over providing a quality education. In this case, 14 parents with 18 children between them in Clark County, Nevada, had enough of this nonsense. And according to the Las Vegas Sun, what you just saw, the parents filed suit against the Clark County School District in federal court on September 20th to eliminate COVID-19 mask mandates. The lawsuit demands $200 million in damages and criminal charges to be levied against top school district officials. I'm really, really proud of what's happening here. And by the way, the last time I tried to go to our local school board meeting here, I was met at the door by a fully armed cop, and the superintendent of the building, and was not allowed entrance into the building. I said to them, I should be allowed into the building. I have religious convictions. I believe that I'd be wearing false witness, or that I'm going to be worshiping another god, COVID, and that I should be allowed to come in. And according to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, race, color, religion. If I were black and you refused me entry because I'm black, then you would not be standing here. But because I'm a Christian, you think it's okay. And we have to start doing things like that and following up on that, which I haven't done a real good job of doing. I'm all over the place lately. Anyway, what we're going to show you next, and again, go Buckeyes. What we're going to show you next is a 24-minute video. And please pay attention to a couple items in there. Number one, this is a doctor who has lost her livelihood thanks to doing what is right. She services over 80,000 patients. That's one thing I want you to note. 2,000 of them had COVID, which is noteworthy. And this is really noteworthy. Not one of those patients, not one of the 2,000 patients went to the hospital. It's bad for business, isn't it? Bad for the pharmaceutical firms. So please listen to this. Have a great weekend. This is BJ Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. And if you would, Mr. Anderson, please play this and believe this is worthwhile. We've been trying to tell you this. We're not doctors. Here's a doctor that's going to tell you what we've been trying to tell you over the last several months.
Sound for some reason.
No. That's not good. Is there on the thing itself? Is there a mute button?
Yeah, check that.
Okay. I've got them all up, all on.
No, it's that's disturbing.
Bear with us, folks. We're having some technical difficulties. It's not coming through. Showing on here. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get that to you right away. We're obviously having some issues with technical issues. Maybe Mr. Anderson can put that together. While he's doing that, we always have a headline section, and the headlines are interesting. They tell us a lot about ourselves. If you're a Martian, you come down to planet Earth, and you were to want to know something about what we're doing, well, go to the headlines. For example, something that Tom had mentioned. Australia begins COVID ethnic cleansing with military roundups of Christians. No, not Christians yet. Indigenous people. David Martin, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Red Pill Expo. There's going to be a reaction to all this pressing down of your liberties and freedoms. There's going to be a reaction to that. You can't do this forever. People will react to it. Fauci accuses Tucker Carlson of killing people by weaponizing lies. By the way, there's an abortion case, the case of the decade at the Supreme Court. Should be interesting to see how that turns out. I hope it works out well. And then GoFundMe yanks bail fundraiser for Waukesha suspect Darrell Brooks. Whew. We can't get a GoFundMe. Darrell Brooks evidently could get it for a while. Kamala Harris reportedly spent over $500 on cookware in Paris amid record U.S. inflation. You know what, folks? Who cares? What does this have to do? Fox News and a lot of our other supporters are so weak on the issues. Like they won't have Tom on. They'll never bring somebody like Tom on because Tom's too radical. He's too radical for him. Yet they'll criticize, they'll talk about the president's inadequacies, his age. So what? It doesn't really make any difference. Satan has control of this nation, and he works through people. He works through his children. Yeah, Joe Biden, in my humble opinion, happens to be one of them, but there are plenty of more, millions more, that he can work through. But please, making fun of other people, calling them names, we're better than that, folks. We're better than that. What are your suggestions? Fox News does fear porn all the time. And the only suggestion that they have, which I mentioned, I believe, on last week's program, is to what? Elect more Republicans. You know, we had a Republican president, a Republican Congress, Republican Senate. You know, we had that. And what did they do? Yeah. Look where we are today. And then if we do get Republicans elected, the Marxicoms, the Marxist communists, have already created a socialist environment where Everyone expects something from the government. Everyone expects something from the government. Money, food, phones, transportation, healthcare. Everyone expects that from the government. And the Marxicoms, we call them Democrats as well, are 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 5 trillion, 11 trillion. You can't take that money back, folks. Once you give it out, you get into office. If I could get into office, I would probably get impeached, because I would start taking these free goods, these communist issues, communist monies, and give it back to the taxpayer, the real workers in America. But I can't do that. First of all, I can't get elected because I'm too doggone honest. And I'm not part of the Republican Party or yada, yada, yada. But we've got to recognize what we're doing here. We're giving. It's Santa Claus. How do you say next year there's not going to be a Santa Claus? How do you say that to the people that expect him to feed them? Huh? What are your suggestions, Fox News? Who are you bringing on as guests, Fox News? I challenge you. Bring somebody on like Tom Haviland, okay? Or JC, Jeff Klein. Bring somebody out there that's doing something, that's creating a stir. There's pastors out there that are doing a great job. You're not going to bring them on. Fox, conservative news. I'm done. Dollar Tree with my rant. Dollar Tree announces most items will now cost $1.25. There's your inflation, folks. Just looked at Dollar Tree. What was $1 is now $1.25. And I'd be willing to bet that's going to change very shortly to probably $2.25. What's next Thanksgiving going to look like for you folks? What's it going to look like next year? First 2020 election, fraud charges released. How far do you think that's going to go, folks? Merck COVID pill, effective. Experts will review safety. I got an article here about that pill somewhere that I wanted to read to you. Yeah. I think we're going to take maybe a break.
Maybe. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think I removed myself. And I can't find the issue with the audio on that video. So
okay.
I'm probably going to get fired again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to take a stand on something here. But I'll play a little quick clip here for you.
Okay.
Board, and it seems to me it's intentional because they just keep making things worse, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, you name it. That's the situation. So I think the American people fully understand it.
Well, you bring up a good point. It's intentional. I mean, at least with energy costs, I do think it's intentional, Congressman.
Yeah. No, it sure is. Remember, 3 weeks ago in committee, Ro Khanna, a Democrat member of Congress, we have the CEOs of the oil and gas companies in there, and Ro Khanna was badgering the witnesses saying, will you pledge today? Will you promise to decrease production? And I'm like, the same time you're trying to get American companies to decrease production, you got the President of the United States begging OPEC to increase production. I asked him in the hearing, I said, what do you guys want? $8 gasoline? And the truth is they do. They're this committed to their crazy Green New Deal policies. They actually want to harm American families. And I hate to say that because you wouldn't think guys in elective office would really want to do that to their constituents and to our country. But in fact, they do. The border has to be intentional. 1.7 million illegal crossings this year. What they're doing to the price of goods and services has to be intentional with their crazy spending. And now they're going to make it even worse by putting tax increases, if they pass this plan, putting tax increases on the very people who've been busting their tail trying to help their family over the last several months. Yeah.
BJ Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. We're rounding the turn. 15 minutes until the end of the show and the beginning of the game.
keeping you informed. This is Last Call with BJ Edwards.
Dateline, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I don't know whether you're aware of this. I keep telling you, don't get your hopes up. In a stunning reversal, Kyle Rittenhouse awoke this morning to discover that he had been found guilty after all. Prosecutors explained that during the night, they had found dozens of mail-in jury votes declaring the defendant guilty on all counts. Apparently, boxes of these mail-in votes arrived in a truck at the courthouse around 3:00 a.m. Attorneys for Mr. Rittenhouse were dumbfounded as to how such a thing could have happened, raising questions as to the validity of the mail-in jury voting. They stated, "We never heard of this. This isn't part of the legal system. Where did these votes even come from? How dare you question the sanctity of our criminal justice system?" cried the prosecuting attorney, gun in hand. "There is no justice until every vote is counted." Prosecutors then explained that it was a new COVID measure they had just instituted, but given how well it's worked out, they said, "We're planning on making it permanent."
I don't think so, Tim.
I don't think so, Tim.
I don't think so, Tim.
Merck, COVID-19 pill effective. I want you to listen to the propaganda that comes out when the other side decides that they're going to control your life. Federal health regulators say an experimental COVID-19 pill from Merck is effective against the virus, but they will seek input from outside experts on risk of birth defects and other potential problems during pregnancy. What do you mean outside experts? The Food and Drug Administration posted an analysis of the pill ahead of a public meeting next week where academic and other experts will weigh in on the safety and effectiveness of the new drug. The agency isn't required to follow the group's advice. The FDA scientists said their review identified several potential risks, including possible toxicity and birth defects. Given those risks, the FDA will ask if advisors whether the drug should never be given during pregnancy or whether it would be made available in certain cases. This drug was approved by the drug maker. I'll let you think on that a second. Fox in the hen house. Hens are fine. Hens are fine. Yeah, but I'm not hearing them cackle. Don't worry about that. We've taken care of it. The hens are fine. Don't worry about it. Back to the article. Under the scenario, the FDA said that the drug would carry warnings about risk of pregnancy, but doctors would still have the option to prescribe it in certain cases where its benefits could outweigh its risks for patients. We got a new abortion pill here, folks. I'm just kidding. Given the safety concerns, FDA said Merck agreed the drug would not be used on children. Additionally, the FDA flagged a concern that Merck's drug led to small changes in the coronavirus signature spike protein, which it uses to penetrate the cell. Theoretically, the FDA cautioned those changes could lead to dangerous new variants. So we got a pill.
Sorry.
We got a pill that's going to create more variants. That's what we need, right?
I'm cutting you off.
That's all right. That's all right. You don't have a job after today anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Regulators also noted that Merck nor do you have a football team. After Ohio State gets done with him, Mr. Anderson is a Michigan fan.
Hey, I'm not wearing those colors on the corner.
Yeah.
In Ohio.
Yeah.
Tom has something to say.
Yeah, he's not a committed Michigan fan, but he's a Michigan fan. Regulators noted that Merck collected far less safety data overall on its drug than was gathered for other COVID-19 therapies. That ought to be scary because, well, anyway, FDA will ask its independent advisors to discuss all these issues and then vote on whether the drug's overall benefits outweigh its risks. All COVID-19, do you know that the FDA is supported, I think it's 49%, almost 50% by pharmaceutical firms? Did you know that?
I don't know that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm. All COVID-19 drugs currently authorized by the FDA require an injection or IV and can only be given by health professionals. If authorized, Merck's drug would be the first that U.S. patients could take at home to ease symptoms and speed recovery. It's already authorized for emergency use in the UK. Good Lord, folks. It's like Tom said, the world is an experimental lab for pharmaceutical firms, for drug treatments. Folks go to the hospital, they get put on a ventilator. Once they get put on the ventilator, they're more likely dead than not. And if that doesn't work, then some people say ivermectin will finish the job, destroying the organs. Got a good friend. He and his wife both got COVID. Monoclonal antibodies. No hospital, no real problems. Just saying. I'm not a research scientist. I'm just saying. Look around you. Look at the people around you. Look what they're experiencing. You're going to be amazed. It's like you're living in a total different world that's being reported. Back to the meeting. The meeting marks the first time regulators have publicly received a new drug for COVID-19. Wait a minute. Reflecting the intense and scrutiny of a pill that could be soon used by millions of Americans. Where was hydrochloroquine? Where was ivermectin? What about that? Yeah, it was already tested. No, it wasn't. The drug, we're not going to do this justice, monopiravir, has been shown to significantly cut the rate of hospitalizations and deaths among people with mild to moderate coronavirus infections. Merck's drug uses a novel approach to fight COVID-19. It inserts tiny mutations into the coronavirus's genetic code to point that it can reproduce itself. But that genetic effect has raised concerns that in rare cases the drug could cause birth defects or tumors. But they don't know until the American public, to the world public, is done with this mass experiment. God bless Tom. And God bless Sam. And God bless JC. And God bless all those other doers that we talk to. God bless them. Godspeed. Pregnant women were excluded from Merck's study. And both women and men in the study were instructed to use contraception or abstain from sex. What? Forest Park, Merck, what? Forest Park, there's a study the other day that said I'm sorry, it was a rumor the other day that the vaccination causes AIDS. Merck says results from 2 company studies in rodents show the drug does not cause mutations or damage to DNA in these animal models. For now, the company said that the rodents received higher doses for longer periods of time than humans will take the drug. FDA reviewers, no, we're talking about something that usually takes years, folks, almost decades in some cases. And this is being done overnight, in essence. FDA reviewers also confirmed previously reported interim results from Merck that the pill cut the rate of hospitalizations and deaths by about half among patients. However, on Friday morning, Merck announced updated results. Remember what I told you before is what you first hear from the FDA and from Merck, that this is hope. This is good. I can't wait till this goes further. You've got those hopes built up. And then after the fact, Friday morning, Merck announced updated results from the study that showed a smaller benefit from the drug. Among more than 1,400 adults in the company study, the drug reduced the combined risk of hospitalization and death by 30%, less than the 50% initially reported based on incomplete results. Nearly 7% of patients who received Merck's drug within 5 days of COVID-19 symptoms ended up in the hospital and 1 died. That compared to 10% of the patients hospitalized who were taking a placebo and 9 deaths. Folks, women and children first. They're coming for the new babies and their mothers who knew enough not to take the vax while pregnant. Mark my words. Diversionary. And what has happened to families? The family is the foundation of all society. If you destroy the family, then you destroy society. And what's going to replace family? The government. The state's your daddy. They're going to supply, they're already trying to supply most of the needs of all U.S. citizens. And where they're getting the money from is just insane. It's like taking your credit card and going to the store, and then you run up a bill for $5,000, and then you go back to the store and say, here's my credit card. I want to pay for that $5,000 bill. And then the store, the American public, you say, oh yeah, that's okay because I want to sell you more goods. Is there anything else in the store you'd like to buy today, sir, now that you've paid off your bill? This is insane. Inflation is going to, remember Nazi Germany, what happened there? I think they had to burn the money just to keep warm because it was worthless anyway.
They papered their walls with it.
Yeah. Insulation.
It was insulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fire starters.
Well, maybe next week we'll be able to get that video that I want to show you folks is so incredibly well done and so telling about a doctor who lost her job in Texas because she was successfully treating patients.
2,000 patients.
Never went to the hospital.
No deaths.
And of course, the press wanted to know if she had prescribed that horse medication, right? That's what they want to know. Yeah. They want to poison the information. They've put that out like racism. The horse medication. They use those key words. And shame on you for buying it. Shame on you for buying it. Not talking about you, Tom. Not talking about you, Sam. But shame on y'all for buying it. Have the courage this week. Just do one thing. Take that mask off. For 2 hours as you're out, take it off. See what happens. Put off getting that shot for another month.
Here's what happens to some people.
I'm getting assaulted. I'm getting kicked out of the hospital. I'm getting kicked out by right here. What's your name? What's your name?
Leave, sir. You have to leave.
I won't be leaving.
You have to leave.
I won't be leaving.
You have to leave.
This is my child.
I
won't be leaving with her, or I won't be leaving at all.
You will be leaving. Or Charlie Bay is going to be going to ejection from room 3. They ring delivery. You have to leave, sir.
I'm going to stay here with my wife and my kid.
All right, I'm asking you to leave.
No.
Okay.
I'm staying here with my wife and my kid. I will not go anywhere. I'm staying here with my wife and my kid. I'm not going anywhere. You guys are on video. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with my wife and my kid. Do not touch me. You have no right. Do not touch me. You have no right. I am staying with my wife and my kid. Do not touch me. Do not touch me. I am with my wife and my kid. Do not touch me. This is wrong. You guys are so mean. Tell me. Look what's going on. These people are trying to kill me. These people are trying to kill me. Yes. They tell you one visitor, and then they try to kick you out. Look at this. Look at this.
Nobody's trying to kill you.
Yes. Just please leave. Please leave.
We're not leaving.
I'm not leaving. This is my wife and my kid. I'm not leaving my wife and my kid. And I would hope you would not leave your wife and kid either. And you wouldn't leave your wife and kid either, right? No. No, my wife is right there.
Come on, you gotta leave.
No, you guys are upset. Stop telling. These people are upsetting my wife, who's about to have my baby, and you're trying to drag me out of the fucking room.
I'm not dragging you anywhere.
You guys are trying to get me away from my baby. It's never going to happen.
There are other
I'm never going to leave my child or my wife because of a COVID test. Do you understand me? Do you understand me that this is my right? This is my wife, and she is crying right there.
Join us next week for Last Call with BJ Edwards.